Welcome everybody to our webinar on Universal Design for Learning today, and you're joining us from Hobsonville Point Secondary School in the heart of West Auckland. My name is Vanna. I am the Learning Support Leader in Senko here at HPSS, and I'm joined by my colleague.
I'm Danielle Myburgh. I'm an across school lead and a principal's nominee. Those are kind of silly names, but essentially I look after quality assurance of our qualifications, and I do a lot of coaching and mentoring and professional learning development for schools in our local area.
I think we've been really lucky, Danielle, because we've both been here for such a long time. And so Hobsonville Point Secondary School's inclusive practice, I feel like, has been the backbone of our work. And I'm really excited to share with everybody today some of the things we've done. We're going to start with our karakia, and it's kind of like setting an intention for us today as we begin our webinar. So feel free to join me if you'd like to, or you can listen to our whakataka timitanga karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana. He huriahi mā tātou e te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou e tātou katoa. Starts us off right. It's nice, that one. All right, let's get into it. Yeah, so I think Universal Design for Learning, this image has really captured, I guess, our thoughts and thinking here around what UDL should be. And it's that it's, explicitly planned and built into everything from the ground up, from the design perspective. It's not an add-on, and it's not something that you can sort of, just make up as you go. It's best when you're explicitly planning and including for all learners in your classroom. And I think we're all probably at that stage where we have, such a diverse range of learners that UDL becomes the key component of our planning, our curriculum delivery that ensures success for learning and inclusive practice. Danielle, have you got anything you want to add to that?
I think probably just the stressing the importance of that, actually planning for diversity. I think one of the things that a lot of staff don't realize early on in their journey is if you plan effectively for every learner, your classroom time becomes much easier because everyone's experiencing some success. So the behavior management, just everything becomes easier because every learner can be successful and can be purposeful in making progress. And I think that is pretty critical if you want to have an effective classroom, really.
I think that's really important too, especially as our class numbers grow, right? And our diverse needs continue to grow. We want everybody thriving in their place of learning. Cool. The next slide, I guess, talks about a little bit was something that we wanted to embed in our culture here and why we wanted it to be a part of our journey, because we knew that one size fits all wasn't going to be an option, that catering to inclusive practice and our diverse needs means that everybody has the right to learn differently and at a different place, and that varying your classroom program means that everybody's getting an ample opportunities to thrive, to feel success, to be engaged. And I don't know, my experience is that when you get engagement, you get success, and then you get more engagement, and then you get more success. So it kind of, tumbles on. And I really like that part of what UDL does. And it also means that we're not just focusing on one area of learning. We can look at personal excellence and academic excellence. I think for me, I just like how you can take a learner from where they are and move them forward, but it doesn't really matter where they start from, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's how you find some of it in your class, Danielle.
Definitely. I think the meeting students where they're at, but the goal being progress, is quite different from that kind of deficit mindset of it's not of a student not being good enough or not being at the level. It's actually you're here now, what do we do next? And I think UDL is really great in that it facilitates that process of trying to work out, okay, what's next? what can I do that's in my control as a teacher that is going to help the student make progress on their pathway to success.
It's also that partnership, isn't it, where you've got the students then starting to think, how can I make this work for me? What can I do without an adult?
Yeah.
And I think that becomes the end goal, right?
I think that's the thing about UDL that I think is so powerful, is what it does essentially is it builds agency. It builds the students' capability to be confident in their own learning and their own skill sets. And to, I always think about Mary Poppins, of you're wanting to train them so they don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
That's what a really agentic learner is able to do, right? And UDL gives us the framework to know how to do that well, with plenty of research to support us on how to do it effectively.
I love that. What a framework. And I think, speaking of framework, our next slide is going to be exactly that. So along with the principles of UDL, Danielle designed this amazing rubric for our staff, which talks about when you're the person that's leading the learning from the front or the side as the teacher, that you've got different ways in your planning and your ideas that mean that the students can access the learning. And this one's on representation. And you can see the pre-structural all the way up to extended abstract. And as a teacher, what are you doing to ensure your checklist caters for some of these things? I feel like you can go from pre-structural to extended abstract 4 times in a day, Danielle, but it's about explicit opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And designing learning to include this, not just kind of accidentally waiting for it to happen.
That's a good term, actually, accidentally waiting for it to happen. So this rubric here, this part of the rubric covers representation, so how they're accessing, multiple modes. I particularly like the multiple modes, and I do love the way we can leave verbal instructions for them to access multiple times in our planning. It's something you do really well, Danielle.
Thanks. I think in making this rubric, the thing that I feel like we haven't quite got the hang of is that last box around empowering students. Sometimes I find, as people are on the journey of embedding UDL, that one of the challenges is realizing that just because you give students access to these different tools doesn't mean they're going to use it. If they've always been trained to use the same thing, even if it doesn't work for them because it's comfortable, they might continue to use that tool. So if we're really empowering our students to make purposeful decisions about what tools they're using, it does require us to really think about how we go about helping our students get comfortable with the different modes of accessing information.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a journey for some, right? So it takes a long time to get that embedded. Okay, next up we have providing multiple means of action and expression. Once again, we've got the full rubric set there, where you can start with, I do not yet provide options for physical action, expression, communication, and executive functions, all the way up to I'm empowering students to make purposeful choices. I feel like that purposeful word is quite key at the end of your journey. And I also kind of want to highlight here, maybe it doesn't matter where the learners start. As a teacher, it's okay if you're starting at pre-structural because you're on the journey and you're starting. So it's an easier step to, offer one way for students until you build up your own confidence. And hopefully through student success and their engagement, your confidence will grow and allow for more opportunities for you to feel like you can provide more than one option for your learners. Engagement. I feel like this one might be my favourite. I don't know. This floats my boat. So how you're getting the students to engage, how are they feeling about their learning, removing the barriers so that they do feel successful. And as a teacher, I don't know, I feel like when you can provide the multiple strategies consistently, then you've just got everything in your classroom running really well. The kids know that it's there, that you're consistently providing for them. They know where to access the information, and it just takes a layer of stress off everybody. That would be my favourite thing, I think, about using UDL in regards to engagement. Do you want to add anything, Danielle?
I think I'm okay, Vanna. Thanks.
Because we're just so good. It's definitely our favourite, I think. Yeah. And so part of our journey with Everway came from the desire to embed UDL. We have beautifully got the word inclusive written in our vision statement as a school, as a kora, and so that held us to account in some ways to make sure that we were building sustainable, inclusive practices. And we've been with Everway now for, I think this is our 9th year, and we've grown from, using one thing to multiple tools from Everway, because what we really needed to do, and we learnt this very early on in our journey, was that we needed to meet the needs of each learner, regardless of where they were starting. At a high school level, sometimes you're expecting them to come in perhaps at the level 4 where you're hoping they are, but that's not life. That's not how education works. So we wanted a tool that worked for those students who were finding learning hard, but we also wanted a tool for those students who didn't find learning hard, that there was going to be something that we could offer to everybody, so there was no stigma attached, there was no I don't know what's the word, the challenges about rolling it out. It was just, we just wanted something to work for everybody, and we've loved that. And what we have learned now is that engagement and behaviours shift when the learners are feeling empowered, they're able to be independent. Some of our kids, have come from a primary and intermediate school where they may have had a teacher aide, a kaiwhina, a learning assistant sitting beside them consistently. By the time they come to high school, I tell you what, they're pretty quick to tell you, I'm done with that. And there's no shame in that. They're just like, nah, get away from me. And so I think the tools from Everway have made us remove that barrier for the learners. They feel like they can be independent. They become risk takers because they can give things a go on their own. They've got support from students. They've got support from their peers, from their friends, and certainly from their teachers. So it feels like it was a really good move to encompass everything that we were wanting to embed in our pedagogy delivery, our curriculum delivery alongside UDL, and these just embed beautifully. So Danielle is a biology teacher, science teacher, maths whiz. I don't know, is there anything else we're going to add in there, Danielle? And her classes use the
I think
tools
just general purpose nerd, I think is...
So Danielle's going to do some demonstrations for you today and show you how she uses some of the tools from Everway. Danielle, let me know if you want me to talk while you're demonstrating, or if you want to talk, you just share with us some of your gems.
All right, so to start with, I'll just get my my file up on the screen. Give me a second. All right, can you see that all right, Vanna?
Looks great.
Okay,
I don't know
cool.
what
So I thought
good function means, but it looks great.
I thought I would just talk really quickly before I jump into demonstrating the Everway tools. We talked before about the UDL rubric and what it looks like, what it might look like to embed it. So this is just a random task I pulled from one of my Google Classrooms. So you can see that right from the word go, our school has a thing where we try and signal really clearly what's type of thinking is being used. So that's part of those developing self-management skills. It's actually signposting the kind of thinking that we want to do in a task. You can see that I have my assessment for learning rubric there visible for the students to have a look at. I have a range of resources that has like different ways for students to access the same information. So I particularly like to use websites like Bitesize or Britannica because they have multiple modes. They include dictionary tools, they include videos, they include various things. So you can see that in action on this task. But then what you section, and then there is if you keep going, there's should do section and a could do section. So again, just helping students with the self-regulation. Generally the rule in my class is the must do section you must do even if you're away sick. The should do you should do, but if something dramatic happened in your life, it's okay if you don't do that. And then the could do is more the extension, trying to push yourself to a higher level. And what you can see in this task as well is that it's scaffolded. And it includes a range of different modes. So students are asked to do some illustrations to illustrate the meaning of something. Also, it's really hard for AI to do really ugly pictures like this. So I know they actually read it. And you can see that there's some identifying tasks, then some tasks that move to describing and more processing related, and then constructing things. So it builds in complexity so that every student can have some success as they work through this task. And then eventually they actually get to taking what they've illustrated and summarized in their words, and they're planning TikToks, and they've created some TikToks with them. So, and then evaluating it. So you can see just in this one task, the range of thinking that's involved, the range of self-management things that have been embedded within it. So I thought just while it's up, I'll talk through that a little bit. And just it's worth knowing this is how I plan all my tasks, because the more you do it, the faster you get at it, and it stops feeling like universal design for learning or differentiation or any of those things as an add-on to your practice. It just becomes what you do as you build confidence and capability. It just, yeah. And I have very few behavior management things because my kids are all engaged. All right, let's look at some
for them too, right? Sorry to interrupt. It's predictable.
Yeah.
They know what's expected. They can walk in. They know what your planning is going to look like. I really appreciate that, Danielle.
Yeah. And I think also because they know that that thing about having some success early, there's lots of research that shows us that when you have two groups and one group is given a task first that they can succeed at, they're more likely to try harder with a difficult task afterwards. So
Yeah.
I tend to keep that in mind around planning for helping students be more self-regulated.
Yeah.
All right, shall we look at some Everway tools?
Love to.
All right, so I've particularly chosen this rather text-heavy bit because I think one of the tool that I use the most is Read&Write. And the reason I use that so much is because I teach in a subject that's very language-heavy. There's a lot of decoding of language that has to take place. And because sciences are often still assessed in a very traditional text-heavy exam mode type thing. So making sense of the concepts and things requires high literacy skills. So a couple of my favorite tools. One of the things I love especially about Read&Write at the moment is the tool that reads to you. I don't know if you can hear that. So with these new AI voices that adds a bit of nuance to the reading voice, I'm finding that I use it more and more. And there's a number of reasons. First of all, because it sounds like David Attenborough is reading to me, and I'm quite partial to a voice that sounds like David Attenborough as a science teacher.
Yeah.
But also because in lots of academic subjects, there's a whole lot of new vocabulary that students need to learn to pronounce. So you can have your tool pronounce complicated words that are new to students. So that can be really helpful. We also know that if you're reading something while it's being read to you, you retain more of it. So I encourage my students, and when I say my students, I mean the entire class, to do that when they're reading new material, because it does help the sense making and the retention.
I like the way it highlights each word too, right? So you can follow along, and it helps that retention.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for people who are newer on this journey to realize that tools like this isn't just for students who are struggling. Tools like this is for everybody. It allows everybody to do better, including as a staff member. I have a chronic illness, which sometimes means that reading on a screen sucks, like stabbing migraine type thing. And it means that I can listen to my students' work and I can still give them feedback without having to look at a bright screen. So there's lots of other ways that it's beneficial as well. My other favorite tools, and I know my students really love these ones, is the highlighting tool. So for example, I can highlight a few of the keywords that I know is really important. And I can maybe say, okay, so maybe that one's a different color or a different category. And then, this is honestly one of my favorite things ever. I use it for everything. It has this little collects highlight buttons. And then what it does is it will generate a document for me where it will automatically collect all of the things I've highlighted onto a separate document. So it's a really neat way for me to show the evidence of a really neat way for students to show evidence of engaging with the text. So I'll just see if I can share the other screen that's generated that on. This might take me a second.
I like when it generates the new script for you at the bottom, how it also sources where they've got it from. Go. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, so all of those words that I have just highlighted, I collected them and put them on. So if I highlight phrases or paragraphs, it's a really nice way, a simple embedded way for students to annotate the text that they are dealing with. In the same way, another great feature that we can use, sorry, I just get my zooms right so everyone can see good, is when we've highlighted terms. So I'll just switch back to my other screen again. We can, as Vanna said, we can collect the words and it'll give us definitions. So that again is endlessly helpful in literacy heavy subjects, anything where there's a lot of terms to make sense of. So I can, let me demonstrate that again. All right, so I've got my highlighted words, and now if I head up to this button over here that says vocabulary list, I can tell it which colors to collect, and then it'll collect it and it will output it into a document that is a table with all of the definitions included. And I'll just give it a second to finish doing that. There we go. And I'll change my screen so you can see what it's generated. There you go. So click of a button, literally, and it's generated for me collected all the words that I selected and added in the definition and with some visual images as well to help students make sense of the term, which is really, really helpful. I also really like the fact that it automatically makes this notes column, because then I can ask students to put in the more scientific version of it, and that's appropriate to, you know, if you're a year 13 biology student, the complexity of language you might use is a lot more complicated than what you might use if you're a year 9 student. So just helping students navigate the language codes in order to be successful.
I've never really thought about using the notes column like that, but I really like that. I like how you can go in and they can add in their own part, you know, and you can ask more of them, you know, I like that.
Yeah. It also, I think generally I like students to build on and keep refining so that they can see and experience the development of higher level thinking. Some of my other favorite tools in here include just the good old picture dictionary. With so many students who are English second language learners, I find that a particularly useful tool. And just as a visual learner myself, it helps with memorizing things anyway. There's a series of other helpful tools here. So of course, I think we have a student that will present to you in a bit about some of the tools he uses. But some of the other things that I use quite a bit is when I'm giving feedback, is actually using the Talk&Type tool. So particularly when you're giving large amounts of feedback and you're having to say the same thing 20 times over, you can use it as a comment to type. and I can just edit, and I find that that saves a lot of time for me.
Mm.
There's also there's endless uses there. Of course, the translator for my second language learners, they find that really useful. And having it embedded in the document means the student isn't opening another tab, which means they don't tend to get as distracted. I think that's, those are probably my favorite ones. And Vanna, did you have any favorite uses of these tools?
Yeah, I love the vocab list. And I've never thought to use the notes. I'm mad. I'm going to remember to do that now. But also for me, working with some of the learners that find learning hard, then definitely the reading function has been one of our favourites. Finding a voice that works for them, finding the speed that works for them, but also feeling like they can just put their headphones on, read the learning that they need to get, and then ask questions, come back, read it again. It's just, I don't know, it's manner enhancing, right? They're not needing to ask for help all of the time. And what I like is when they're ready to ask for help, they've often tried one or two things first, and then they're asking for help. So they're not feeling like they haven't done anything themselves. They can get started. And so I think it becomes just the whole package, doesn't it?
It does. I think that's the thing for me as well, is that when you help your students learn to use these tools really well, the independence it can grow for them can make such a big difference to their overall experience as a student.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I find, that would be one of my not negotiables, as well as the tools from Everway, is the way we run the workshops, from pre-transition day, right from when they start, so that even when they're starting, on day one, we're getting ahead of it. We're helping them take the stress away. We're explaining why we're doing it. So by the time they end up, in the sciences or it doesn't really matter, in your class in particular, they're absolute whizzes at it. And I feel like that becomes really important, because then it's just what you do and it's how we learn and how it makes sense. Yeah.
I always think about my dad. He's very big on the work smarter and not harder.
Yeah.
And I feel like this tool set really lets you do that. One of the other ones I do use as well is the Equatio tool set. And that one in particular, with supporting students to get their math notation correct, is really helpful.
I think, that's probably a whole nother webinar for us, right? Because the Equatio has provided so much for our maths learners, but I think it's just been an absolute incredible journey for us here as a kura, as a school, using the tools from Everway and embedding UDL. Danielle, you're a foundation staff member. You started here just before me, so you've had the opportunity to build this from the ground up, and I do want to acknowledge at this point that your mahi, that your work and your expertise has been a huge player in our journey with that. And I think you're a legend. Thank you.
Ditto, Vanna. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. We hope you've had a really good time. We're going to gather our thoughts now and come back at you with our learner, Jake, who's going to talk to you around how Everway has supported him. Enjoy your day.